Hello and welcome to the Miracle Stories YouTube channel. In this video, I'm actually going to be presenting my own story, a miracle that I experienced when I was 9 years old that became the inspiration for this channel. But before I get into that, I wanted to give a little bit of guidelines if you were to choose to submit your own miracle story in a separate video. There's some things that I'm looking for, and you'll notice that my own video kind of goes through these. But real quickly, if you send your own, include your name. Also include where you're from or where the miracle occurred. You don't have to give a specific city. If there's a large city nearby, that would be fine. It's just insightful to know where someone's from, particularly if it's another country. The other thing, considering the supernatural aspect of a miracle, it would be interesting to know what your spiritual beliefs are, whether they're religious, theological, spiritual, philosophical. Just to give some insight also, might give some insight into the miracle itself. But the main reason is I have a suspicion that miracles happen to people of all beliefs, all cultures, and showing that, I think, would show a unification that sometimes we don't have, and historically, as a religious people, we haven't always have. But if we find out that all of us, even atheists, have an interaction with a being that appears to have a personal relationship with human beings and can do just about anything on their behalf, I think it gives us a new perspective on what may be out there and some of the intolerance that we may have between other beliefs that may be experiencing the same thing. So that is the purpose for that. The other thing is give some background of your miracle. A lot of times miracles are very personal from what I've seen and what I've experienced myself. So don't be afraid to give some background so people understand as the miracle unfolds what that significance might be. Also, obviously, include your story, and if you have any pictures that might illuminate your story, even better. And then lastly, my guess is you probably thought a lot about your own miracle. You might have some ideas on why it occurred the way it did, and maybe even what the occurrence itself says about the nature of the universe and the nature of this being, entity, that is capable of these miracles. So anyway, that's kind of an introduction of what I'm looking for, and I will do the same with my miracle coming up now. Well, hello, my name is Dave. I'm the host of this channel, and this is my miracle. I grew up in a small rural town of Cordelia, California, very close to a town of Fairfield, California, that is within the outskirts of the Bay Area of San Francisco. Very rural area, I think probably a population of 300 or 400 when I was growing up. And I lived on an acre of land, pretty excluded from other folks, so there wasn't a whole lot of people to talk to. And I didn't have any brothers and sisters, and my parents had their own things that they had to do, so I spent a lot of time by myself. And then when I was 4 years old, my parents got me a dog. His name was Pete, and that dog really kind of became my universe. We spent a lot of time together. It was really all I had, a lot of Saturdays, a lot of time, and it kind of became a joke. Dave and Pete, always together, and that's pretty much who I spent all my time with. Most mornings on a Saturday, back when there were Saturday cartoons, it wouldn't take long that I would be watching, and I would hear my dog Pete scratching on the sliding glass door. There were curtains, so I couldn't see him, but I would hear the scratching, and I would know that he was ready for me to come out, and we'd go out, and we'd hang out, we'd go out to the local creek, or what have you. Then when I was 9 years old, he went missing. And this was uncharacteristic. Never really went missing. Never really left the area unless I left with him. So this, as a 9-year-old, got me concerned. Then the next day came, and he was still missing. And as I mentioned in a previous video, I've had some experience with depression, but depression as an adult, when you have responsibilities and other things going on, it kind of manifests itself differently. than when you're a 9-year-old child. And that's part of the reason I gave you the background of how important this relationship was, because it just felt like all life had drained out of me. Nothing really mattered anymore. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to get up. And all I did, because I was raised by my mother, who was from Texas. I was raised Southern Baptist, and she would take me every Sunday. And you learn to pray. You pray for what you want. You pray for help. So I started to pray, and I started to pray a lot, and that's really about all I did. And again, days went on, the first week. And then the second week, still nothing. And on that second week was a Sunday. And at this particular time, the church that we were going to was experiencing a schism. Basically, another pastor broke off that had a little different beliefs, and my mom and a group of others were meeting at a Holiday Inn on the outskirts of Fairfield, this larger city that I was telling you about, which is about 7 miles from Cordelia. So they were meeting at the Holiday Inn. They had a little room there, as hotels often do, and they were having services in this room. And again, this is the second week. I'm in church, so I'm praying full steam. And at this point, I am quite frustrated, though, and I'm really wondering, is all of this true? Why am I not being answered? Is it something with me? But I can remember very clearly having this conversation, and I ended that prayer with, I'm not praying again. I give up. If it doesn't happen after this, then I don't know why, but I guess I'm not supposed to have this dog anymore. So after the church services ended, everybody kind of flooded out, and we flooded into the lobby of the hotel room. And we're just, as getting out of church typically is, everybody's just kind of standing around talking. And I hear a woman say, "Is that someone's dog?" And at that moment, I hear a familiar sound. And I turn to see what she's referring to. And it is my dog, Pete, at the door, at the glass door of this hotel, scratching away at the glass. And I turned, and it's hard to explain what it feels like. You're disoriented. Time slows down, but you just realize something's happened that you don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. And then curiously, even though I had just had this prayer, this conversation with God, I did not think that I was being answered here. I didn't think at all. I saw my dog there, and I can tell you my dog is very unique looking. He's like half dachshund, half basset hound, very distinct spots. And it was certainly a dog that looked exactly like him. But I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And I remember going out the door, and this dog had jumped up on my leg, but I really didn't pay much attention because I was moving on out in the area to all the people around saying, does anyone know where this dog came from? Is this anyone's dog? And I noticed off to the right there was like a little terrier that was kind of loose around its owner. And then I saw another dog on a leash. It was kind of a large white dog. And I thought, okay, there's 2 dogs around here, so maybe something dog is happening. And this other dog's got caught up in that. So I go up to these people and I said, has anyone seen where this dog came from? Does anyone know where the owner of this dog is? And they looked at me like, no, we have no idea. And the curious thing is, my dog Pete can never resist other dogs. If there is another dog, it's going to go. It's going to sometimes mix it up with that other dog. But he wasn't. And if he would have come walking up, he would have been with those other dogs. He wouldn't have been at the window scratching. So, as I couldn't get information from anybody about where the dog came from, I went back up to the dog and looked him over. He was completely healthy. It had been 2 weeks. No sign of distress, no problem with the coat, any of that. So it's still really hard to believe. But there was one thing that I could do with my dog. It was kind of a curious trick, that when I would tap my foot, Pete would roll over. And I remembered that. And I tapped my foot, and Pete rolled over. And then I knew it was him. And at that point, I really don't have much memory. I remember, I guess, taking the dog to my mom's car and taking it home. I don't remember anyone talking about it much after that. It was just Pete. Pete was back. And I don't even really remember, frankly, having any sort of period where I thanked God or, for this prayer that apparently was answered. It was so overwhelming. And it almost makes me wonder how much I really believed. Because it certainly wasn't instant to say, my prayer is answered. There's been a miracle. So anyway, that is my story. I had the dog for about 5 more years after that. The evidence is there. The people saw it. Some of the people were actually praying for me. They're at the church. They were stunned by it. My dad was actually not a religious person. When I came home with the dog, he was stunned. But again, really didn't answer any questions. I don't know that he really wanted to know. It was overwhelming. So that's my story. And I've thought about it over and over again. I've thought of any possible explanation. I know sometimes dogs have been known to find their owners or know where they are. But why did he choose the hotel? Why not just come home? And why did both happen at the same time? I mean, it would have been impressive if he would have just shown up at a grocery store when I was going to the grocery store. But he shows up at this church, at this time, in this place, miles from my house. I can find no way around it. So in this last segment, I want to provide at least a little bit of analysis of what I think my personal miracle shows about the nature of the universe and the nature of what appears to be an entity in the universe with powers to interact with human beings in a positive way. So the first thing it tells me is that there is I say entity, I'll say God, there is a God out there that is personal, that understands your situation, hears you, and will take action. I can't have any other explanation for that and how it occurred, that this is a God that's just kind of broadly out there keeping the mechanics of the universe going, or somehow embedded in science itself and not really personal. This was a clearly personal action, an answer to a request from another human being. Secondly, this God is creative. This God sends messages. It would have been very easy to have answered my prayer and had just the dog come home. That would have been very easy. That would have said nothing. It would not have suggested that anything important happened. But if God simply wanted to answer my prayer and show mercy, the low-key thing to do would have just the dog come home. But the dog did not. The dog appeared in possibly the most dramatic fashion, scratching on the door that I'm used to, right after church where I had said my last prayer. That's creative. Another important thing I think here to see here is that 2 weeks passed, and I'd been praying for days. So this entity allowed my suffering. They could have easily answered the first time I prayed, but there was a larger scheme involved, and there was suffering involved. And I could go into some detail what that aspect and what understanding that aspect of the universe meant for me later on, but I won't now. I will just say that it's clear that there is a purpose for suffering, and the suffering is allowed. And the last thing is, and there are probably others, but the last, I think, critical thing is that it happened just in time, just at the point that I had given up. And I think that's important. That's important for us to remember, is that we shouldn't give up. We should understand that suffering is necessary, that it provides some sort of purpose. And the creativity of it has a purpose. And I look at what's happened to me now and my inspiration to create this channel. And if it wasn't for all of those things, I probably wouldn't have. And when I went through, as I mentioned previously, a very, very difficult time in my life, I was able to look back at this miracle, see the prayer answered, see the creativity, see the suffering that had to occur, and then see the just-in-time, miraculous, impressive answer to that prayer. So I think the message to all of us is, particularly those of us that are suffering or may be suffering in the future, is to remember that this is sometimes necessary, but that, to use a religious word, redemption is always possible and can happen. And beyond the miracle that I'm presenting of my own, I anticipate that we're going to get much, much more that show this very similar pattern in the universe and in this entity that personally interacts with us to teach us things and help us grow.